Are you completely insane? My husband screamed, slamming his hands against the thick glass doors of the airport VIP lounge. His face flushed with a terrifying mix of rage and absolute panic. Turn that camera off right now. He lunged toward the professional live streaming setup I had erected in the center of the room, but two massive dark-suited security guards instantly stepped forward, physically blocking his path. I won't turn it off, Adrian, I replied, my voice echoing coldly through the high-end microphone to the 50,000 people already watching online. You thought I was just an orphan with no family to protect me. You never realized I was the family name people fear. My name is Isla. I am 29 years old, and for the last 3 years, I played the role of the quiet, obedient, impoverished wife to a rising tech CEO. But to understand how I ended up publicly destroying him on a global live stream, we have to go back to 48 hours earlier, when he left me waiting at Terminal 4. The first-class VIP lounge at JFK Airport was quiet, smelling of expensive espresso and leather. I was sitting in a plush armchair, dressed in a comfortable cashmere travel set, holding 2 tickets to Paris. It was our 3rd wedding anniversary. Adrian had promised me this trip for 6 months. He had kissed my forehead that morning, told me he had to run into the office to finalize a few emails, and promised he would meet me at the gate by noon. At 11:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. Isla, I am so incredibly sorry. A massive M&A deal just dropped on my desk. The investors are demanding an emergency boardroom meeting right now. I can't make the flight. Please go to Paris without me. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I love you. I stared at the screen. The text was perfectly crafted. It hit all the right notes: apologetic, corporate necessity, assuring me of his love. Any normal wife would have been disappointed, maybe even angry. But any normal wife would have believed him. I didn't believe him, because 2 minutes before Adrian's text arrived, I had received a different message from a burner number I knew all too well. It was a photo. The image showed Adrian standing in the sterile hallway of a high-end private medical clinic. He was holding the hand of a beautiful, blonde woman named Bianca Cross. Bianca was smiling warmly at the camera, holding up a small, black and white sonogram printout. The caption below the photo read, "He isn't merging companies today, Isla. He's merging families. Have fun in Paris, you pathetic little orphan." I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I didn't type out a furious, broken-hearted response. I simply downloaded the photo, adding it to a hidden, encrypted folder on my phone. The folder was named Archive. It currently contained exactly 178 photos. For the last 3 years, Adrian had been living a double life. And for the last 3 years, Bianca had been secretly sending me the evidence. She sent me photos of them at luxury hotels. She sent me photos of the expensive jewelry he bought her. She sent me receipts for the upscale apartment he was secretly renting for her in Soho. She sent them to torture me. She sent them because she wanted me to break. She wanted me to confront Adrian, throw a hysterical fit, and demand a divorce so she could smoothly step into my place. She thought I was holding on to the marriage out of desperation because Adrian was my only source of financial stability. Adrian believed the exact same thing. When Adrian first met me, I was a 25-year-old graduate student living on a scholarship. I told him my parents had passed away when I was young, and that I had no extended family. I played the part of the quiet, lonely girl perfectly. Adrian loved it. He was a narcissist who thrived on control. He loved the fact that I had no father to interrogate his intentions, no brothers to threaten him, and no family money to fall back on. He believed he was my entire world. He believed I was completely trapped by my dependence on him. He didn't know that my last name wasn't actually Bennett. He didn't know that the scholarship I was on was a private trust fund, and he certainly didn't know that my father was Victor Kingsley, the billionaire chairman of Kingsley Global Holdings. I had hidden my identity my entire adult life to avoid the sycophants and fortune hunters that plagued my family. When I married Adrian, I kept the secret, wanting to believe he loved me for me. But when the first photo from Bianca arrived 2 years ago, the illusion shattered. I didn't leave him immediately. I wasn't just a scorned wife. I was my father's daughter. A Kingsley does not act on raw emotion. A Kingsley builds a dossier. A Kingsley waits until the enemy has completely exposed their flanks. And then a Kingsley executes a total, uncompromising liquidation. I looked at the sonogram photo on my phone. Adrian wasn't just cheating anymore. He was actively trying to replace me, and he thought he could do it while I was conveniently out of the country. He thought he could fly me to Paris, text me a breakup message from across the ocean, and offer me a pathetic financial settlement knowing I had no lawyers to fight him. I stood up from the plush leather chair. I walked over to the VIP concierge desk. "Excuse me," I said, handing the attendant my first-class ticket. "I need to cancel my flight to Paris." The attendant looked surprised, but nodded politely. "Of course, ma'am. Will you be rebooking for a later date?" "No," I replied, my voice perfectly steady. "I won't be needing it." I walked out of Terminal 4. I didn't take a taxi back to our Tribeca penthouse. Instead, I directed my private driver to a high-end commercial printing shop in Midtown Manhattan. I walked into the shop, approached the counter, and handed the manager a silver USB drive. "I need 178 photographs printed," I instructed smoothly. "I want them in 8x10 format. I want the highest quality, high-gloss archival paper you have. I need to be able to see their faces with absolute, perfect clarity." The manager plugged the drive in. He clicked the first photo, his eyes widening slightly as he saw my husband kissing another woman on a yacht. He quickly composed himself. "We can have these ready in 2 hours, ma'am," he said professionally. "Excellent," I replied, sliding a sleek black card across the counter. While the photos were printing, I made 2 phone calls. The first call was to Nora Vale. Nora was officially listed as my freelance virtual assistant. In reality, Nora was a top-tier crisis management coordinator on the Kingsley Global payroll, assigned to handle my personal logistics. "Nora," I said when she answered. "It's time. Initiate protocol, Archangel." "Understood, boss," Nora replied, her voice crisp and highly efficient. "I am dispatching the tech team to the Tribeca penthouse immediately. How much time do we have?" "Adrian is currently at the clinic with Bianca." I checked my watch. "He will likely take her to lunch to celebrate the sonogram." "We have at least 4 hours before he returns to the penthouse to pack his bags and pretend he's moving out. The setup will be completed in 2 hours," Nora confirmed. "I am also securing the VIP lounge at JFK for tomorrow afternoon. The live stream infrastructure will be fully operational." "Thank you, Nora." I hung up and made the second call. This one required an international dial code. The phone rang twice before a distinguished, slightly French-accented voice answered. "Miss Kingsley, Edmond Laurent, the chief of staff for the Kingsley family estate in Paris, greeted me warmly. It is wonderful to hear your voice. I assume this isn't a social call." "No, Edmond," I replied softly, feeling the familiar protective weight of my family's power wrapping around me. "The marriage is over. Adrian has pushed his final boundary." Edmund sighed, a sound of deep, patrician disappointment. "I am deeply sorry, Isla. Your father and I always suspected the boy lacked character, but we respected your wish to handle him yourself. Tell my father to alert the legal department," I instructed, my tone shifting from daughter to executive. "I am dropping the alias tomorrow. I will be publicly exposing Adrian. I need Kingsley Global to be fully prepared for the corporate fallout." "The chairman will be informed immediately," Edmund promised. "The entire Kingsley legal apparatus is at your disposal, Miss Kingsley. When will you be coming home?" "Tomorrow night," I said. "Send the Gulfstream to Teterboro Airport. I'm done playing the Orphan." 2 hours later, I walked out of the printing shop carrying 3 heavy, high-gloss boxes of photographs. I arrived at the Tribeca penthouse at 3 p.m. Nora's tech team had already arrived and worked with terrifying efficiency. The penthouse, which Adrian proudly showed off to his tech bro friends as a symbol of his success, was about to become his personal psychological prison. I opened the boxes. I didn't feel anger as I looked at the photos. I felt the cold, methodical focus of an archivist preparing an exhibition. I took the first photo, a picture of Adrian and Bianca drinking champagne in a hot tub in Aspen, and used high-grade mounting tape to stick it to the expensive Venetian plaster wall in the foyer. Then I placed the second, then the third. I worked for 2 hours. I covered the walls of the foyer, the hallway, and the massive living room. I created a timeline of his betrayal, starting from the very first text message Bianca had sent me, all the way to the sonogram photo from that morning. 178 high-definition, glossy proofs of his lies, staring back at anyone who walked through the front door. Nora's teams had set up 4 digital photo frames on the kitchen island, looping screenshots of his hotel receipts and the bank transfers he used to pay for her Soho apartment. The centerpiece, however, was in the primary bedroom. The tech team had installed a motion sensor projector pointing directly at the wall above our bed. The moment the bedroom door opened, the projector would automatically play a video Bianca had sent me 6 months ago. A video of her rolling around in our sheets while I was out of town visiting a friend. When the gallery was complete, the penthouse looked like the obsessive lair of a serial killer, mixed with the damning evidence board of an FBI investigation. I walked into the living room and approached the glass coffee table. I placed a single, red folder precisely in the center of the glass. Inside the folder was a finalized, legally binding divorce decree. I had already signed it. The terms were simple. I was taking absolutely nothing. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't ask for a share of his startup, Blackwell Systems. I didn't ask for the penthouse. I explicitly waived my right to any financial support. It was the ultimate insult to a man who thought I needed his money to survive. I looked around the silent, photo-covered penthouse one last time. He's going to lose his mind, Nora noted quietly, standing in the doorway holding a tablet. That's the intention, I replied, grabbing my designer coat. Let's go. We have a broadcast to prepare. While I was turning his home into a museum of his infidelity, Adrian was living his delusion. At 4:30 p.m., Adrian and Bianca were sitting in a private booth at an upscale French restaurant in Midtown. The heartbeat was so strong, Bianca smiled, resting her hand on her slightly rounded stomach. She looked across the table at Adrian, her eyes gleaming with calculated victory. I can't believe it's actually happening, Adrian. We're going to be a real family. Adrian smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. He looked incredibly proud of himself. He felt like a titan of industry, successfully managing a complex merger. It's happening, Bianca, Adrian assured her smoothly. By the time Isla lands in Paris, I'll have all my things moved out of the penthouse. I'll text her the news when she checks into the hotel. It's cleaner that way. Bianca pouted slightly, tracing the rim of her water glass. Do you think she's going to fight you, Adrian? I mean, she doesn't have anyone else. She's just going to be so desperate. What if she drags out the divorce to get your money? Adrian laughed, a dark, arrogant sound that perfectly encapsulated everything I despised about him. Isla isn't going to fight me, baby, Adrian said dismissively, taking a sip of his scotch. She doesn't have the spine for it. She's a sweet girl, but she's an orphan with absolutely no backing. She doesn't have a father to hire her a shark of a lawyer. She doesn't have family money to sustain a legal battle. She's completely dependent on me. He leaned closer, his voice dropping into a confident whisper. I'll offer her a $50,000 settlement and a few months of rent. Adrian strategized coldly. She'll be so terrified of being broke and homeless that she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. It's going to be the easiest corporate restructuring of my life, I promise. Bianca smiled brightly, her anxiety entirely alleviated by his arrogance. You're so smart, Adrian. They finished their lunch. Adrian kissed her goodbye, put her in an Uber heading back to her Soho apartment, and then hailed a cab to head downtown. He needed to pack his bags before I supposedly realized he wasn't joining me in Paris. At 5:45 p.m., Adrian swiped his key fob and pushed open the heavy oak door to our Tribeca penthouse. All right, let's get this over with, Adrian muttered to himself, stepping into the foyer. He stopped dead in his tracks. The high-gloss photo of him kissing Bianca on a yacht stared him directly in the face. Adrian blinked, his brain completely failing to process what he was seeing. He slowly turned his head. To his left was a photo of him and Bianca at a gala. To his right was a photo of him buying her a diamond necklace. What the? Adrian whispered, the blood draining rapidly from his face. He took a slow, terrified step forward, moving from the foyer into the long hallway. The walls were covered. Everywhere he looked, his lies were documented in stunning, undeniable high definition. He saw dates. He saw times. He saw images from 3 years ago, proving that the affair wasn't a recent mistake, but a foundational pillar of our marriage. His breathing grew shallow and panicked. He stumbled into the kitchen. The digital frames on the island flashed bright, undeniable evidence of his offshore wire transfers to Bianca's bank accounts. He backed away from the kitchen, feeling like the walls were physically closing in on him. He rushed down the hallway toward the primary bedroom, desperately hoping that somehow this was all a horrific nightmare. He threw open the bedroom door. The motion sensor triggered instantly. The projector whirred to life. The massive wall above our bed lit up with a high-definition video. The sound of Bianca's laughter and Adrian's voice echoed loudly through the silent bedroom, perfectly synchronized with the footage of them rolling around in our sheets. Adrian let out a choked, terrified gasp. He stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of an area rug, and fell hard onto the hardwood floor. He scrambled to his feet, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He ran out of the bedroom, sprinting back into the living room. His eyes darted wildly around the space, finally landing on the glass coffee table. There, sitting perfectly centered, was the red folder. Adrian's shaking hands reached out. He opened the folder. He saw the official divorce decree. He flipped immediately to the signature page. Isla Bennett signed in elegant, steady black ink. He flipped back to the financial terms. He read the clauses. 0 equity in his company. 0 claim to the penthouse. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. She didn't want his money. She didn't want his apologies. She wanted him to know that she knew everything, and that she was walking away without giving him the satisfaction of a fight. Adrian pulled out his phone. His hands were trembling so violently. He dropped the device twice before finally dialing my number. The phone rang in my hand as I sat in the back of a black SUV, heading toward a secure hotel near JFK. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. "Isla!" Adrian screamed into the phone, his voice cracking with sheer, unfiltered panic. "Isla, where are you? What is this?" "What is on the walls?" I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the calm, measured cadence of a corporate executive terminating a redundant employee. "It's a gallery, Adrian," I replied softly. "I thought you might appreciate seeing your life's work displayed so prominently." You knew?" Adrian choked out, the reality of my 3-year silence finally crashing down on him. "How did you get these photos? Who sent these to you?" "Ask your mistress, Adrian," I said, my voice dripping with cold disdain. "She's been sending them to me since the week after our first anniversary. She thought she was breaking my spirit. She thought she was forcing me to leave." "Bianca sent these?" Adrian whispered, his arrogant worldview fracturing. The woman he thought he was protecting, the woman he thought he was building a new life with, had been actively sabotaging him the entire time. "Check the back of the photos in the foyer," I instructed calmly. I wrote the dates and the locations on every single one. "Oh, and Adrian." "What?" he breathed. "Did the doctor tell you it was a girl today?" I asked. Adrian let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. The fact that I knew about the ultrasound, the event that happened mere hours ago, completely broke him. He realized he had never been in control. I had been watching him from the dark the entire time. "Isla, please," Adrian begged, his voice shifting from panic to desperate pleading. "Where are you? Did you get on the plane? Please, let me explain. I can fix this. I'll give you whatever you want. I'll give you half the company. Just tell me where you are." He wanted to find me because he believed he could still manipulate me. He believed that if he could just get me in a room, look into my eyes, and use his charisma, he could force me to sign an NDA, accept a larger settlement, and keep the scandal quiet. He thought he was managing a crisis. He didn't know he was stepping onto a global stage. "I didn't get on the plane, Adrian," I said quietly. "I'm still at JFK, Terminal 4, VIP lounge. I'm coming," Adrian said frantically, already running toward the front door of the penthouse. "Stay right there. Do not talk to anyone. I am coming right now." I hung up the phone. I looked at Nora, who was sitting across from me in the SUV, reviewing the live stream analytics on her tablet. "He's on his way," I said. Nora smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. "Excellent," Nora replied, tapping the screen. "The stream goes live in exactly 12 hours. Let's give the internet a show they will never forget." The next 14 hours were a masterclass in calculated silence. I didn't answer any of Adrian's frantic phone calls. I didn't respond to the 87 text messages he sent, begging me to tell him what terminal I was at, pleading for a chance to explain the gallery in the penthouse. I let the silence stretch out, twisting the knife of his anxiety deeper with every passing hour. He spent the entire night tearing the Tribeca penthouse apart, packing his bags in the dark, surrounded by the high-definition proof of his own lies. Nora and I, meanwhile, spent the night at a luxury hotel near the airport, finalizing the technical infrastructure for the live stream. By noon the following day, the VIP lounge at Terminal 4 had been entirely secured by Nora's team. It was a massive, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. We had rented the entire section, ensuring no other passengers could interrupt the broadcast. In the center of the lounge, arranged like a high-end corporate interview, was a sleek glass table. On the table sat a professional 4K camera mounted on a tripod, 2 massive LED ring lights, and a high-end condenser microphone. Behind the camera sat Nora and a Kingsley Global Network technician, monitoring a laptop that was already connected to 5 different social media streaming platforms. At exactly 1 p.m., I sent Adrian a single text message. "Terminal 4. Private VIP, Lounge, B." The door is unlocked 20 minutes later. The heavy frosted glass door of the lounge burst open. Adrian stumbled into the room. He looked absolutely horrific. His expensive designer suit was wrinkled, his tie was loose, and dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He looked like a man who had spent the last 12 hours drowning in his own adrenaline. He stopped, chest heaving, as he took in the scene. He saw me sitting calmly at the glass table, dressed in an impeccably tailored white blazer, sipping a cup of black coffee. He saw the 2 massive security guards standing near the entrance. And then he saw the camera, the ring lights, and the microphone. "Isla," Adrian gasped, wiping sweat from his forehead. He took a hesitant step forward, completely ignoring the broadcast equipment in his desperation to control me. "Thank God. I thought you left. What is all this? Who are these people?" "Take a seat, Adrian," I said, gesturing to the empty chair across the glass table. "I'm not sitting down," Adrian snapped, his arrogant, commanding tone returning now that he had finally found me. He stepped forward, trying to grab my arm. "We are leaving. We are going home, and we are going to talk about this like adults. You are making a massive scene, Isla. Do you have any idea what you've done to the penthouse? You're acting insane." The 2 security guards instantly stepped forward, their massive frames forming an impenetrable wall between Adrian and the glass table. Adrian stumbled back, genuinely shocked. "What the hell? Isla, tell them to back off." "Sit down, Adrian," I repeated, my voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute calm. Adrian looked at the guards, then looked at me. For the first time in 3 years, the realization that he couldn't physically intimidate me finally began to penetrate his thick skull. He slowly walked around the table and sank heavily into the chair across from me. "You're angry," Adrian began, adopting the soft, patronizing tone he used when he was trying to manipulate a difficult client. "I understand that. You have every right to be angry. Bianca sent you those photos to hurt you, Isla. She's crazy. I was going to break it off with her today. That's why I went to the clinic. I was going to pay her to leave us alone." I stared at him, genuinely marveling at the depth of his delusion. "She's pregnant, Adrian," I stated simply. "I can handle the baby." Adrian insisted quickly, leaning over the table. "I have lawyers. I have money. I can set up a trust fund, make sure she's taken care of, and ensure she never comes near us again. We can move past this. We can still go to Paris. You want me to stay married to you," I summarized, "while you financially support your mistress and your illegitimate child, all while you continue to live in the penthouse I decorated." "Yes," Adrian said, nodding eagerly, completely missing the sarcasm in my voice. "Because I love you, Isla. And let's be realistic here. What other option do you have? There it was, the foundational pillar of his entire strategy. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his posture shifting from frantic to coldly calculated. He believed the initial shock had worn off, and it was time to deploy the heavy artillery. "Look at me, Isla," Adrian said, his voice hardening. "You are upset, but you need to think logically. You signed that divorce paper, leaving everything to me. That was a very emotional, very foolish mistake. If you walk out that door today, you have nothing. You don't have a family to run back to. You don't have parents to pay your rent. You don't have a safety net." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his sleek, titanium corporate credit card, placing it on the glass table between us. "You are an orphan, Isla," Adrian said, twisting the knife with cruel precision. "You have no backing. You have no power in this city. If you leave me, you will be right back where you started, a broke grad student struggling to survive. Let me take care of you. Let me fix this. Stay with me, and I will make sure you never have to worry about money again." He sat back, crossing his arms, looking incredibly satisfied. He had laid out the terms of my surrender. He expected me to cry, to break down, and to ultimately accept his financial leash, because I had no other choice. I looked at the titanium credit card resting on the glass table. I didn't cry. I didn't blink. I reached into the pocket of my white blazer. I pulled out a card of my own, and I placed it directly next to his. It was a solid black heavyweight metal card. It didn't have a visible credit limit. It didn't have a standard bank logo. It had the subtle, deeply engraved crest of a private wealth management tier that only a few hundred people in the world possessed. Adrian looked down at the black card, his brow furrowed in confusion. He was a tech CEO. He knew the hierarchy of wealth. He knew that the card sitting on the table required a minimum liquid asset portfolio of $50 million just to qualify for an application. "What is that?" Adrian asked, his voice suddenly sounding very small in the massive VIP lounge. "You thought I was an orphan, Adrian," I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the glass table. "You thought you had married a woman with no past, no family, and no power. You thought you could treat me like a disposable asset because you believed I was entirely dependent on your success." Adrian stared at the black card, a cold, creeping dread beginning to spread through his chest. "You never asked about my family," I continued, my voice perfectly level. "You never dug into my background because the narrative of the poor, grateful wife fit your ego so perfectly. You loved the idea of saving me. You loved the idea of owning me." "Isla," Adrian whispered, his eyes darting frantically between my face and the black card. "What are you talking about? Whose card is that?" "It's mine," I replied. I looked past Adrian, locking eyes with Nora, who was standing behind the camera. "Nora," I commanded, "take us live." Nora's fingers flew across the keyboard. A small green light on the top of the 4K camera instantly blinked on. "We are live, boss," Nora confirmed crisply, streaming to all 5 platforms. Current viewership is scaling rapidly, 10,000, 20,000, climbing. Adrian whipped his head around, staring at the camera, then back at me, his eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated horror. "What are you doing?" Adrian screamed, lunging across the table, trying to reach the camera. "Are you broadcasting this? Turn it off." The security guards slammed their hands down on his shoulders, forcing him violently back into his chair. "Don't move, Mr. Blackwell," the head guard warned, his voice a deep, menacing rumble. Adrian froze, pinned to the chair, his chest heaving as he stared at the glowing green light of the camera. He was trapped. He was sitting in a soundproof room, surrounded by security, being broadcast live to the internet. I turned my attention entirely to the camera lens. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the high-end microphone. "My name is Isla. For the last 3 years, the man sitting across from me, Adrian Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Systems, believed I was an impoverished orphan named Isla Bennett. He believed I had no family, no financial backing, and no ability to defend myself." I paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a fraction of a second. "He was wrong," I stated. "My real name is Isla Kingsley. I am the only daughter of Victor Kingsley and the sole heir to Kingsley Global Holdings." Adrian's jaw dropped open. The color drained from his face so rapidly I thought he might actually pass out. Kingsley Global Holdings wasn't just a massive conglomerate. It was the specific conglomerate that Adrian's startup desperately relied upon. Blackwell Systems provided back-end logistics software for 3 major shipping subsidiaries owned by Kingsley. Without those contracts, Adrian's company would collapse within a fiscal quarter. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had spent 3 years emotionally abusing, manipulating, and ultimately abandoning the heir to the empire that fed him. No, Adrian breathed, shaking his head in rapid, frantic denial. No, that's impossible. Victor Kingsley's daughter lives in Europe. She's completely private. You can't be. I attended university in New York under my mother's maiden name to avoid the exact type of opportunistic leeches that plague my family, Adrian, I explained coldly, not breaking eye contact with the camera. I married you because I believed, foolishly, that you loved the girl who had nothing. I kept the secret because I wanted our marriage to be real. But as it turns out, you only loved me because you thought I was weak. I picked up a red folder from the table, a duplicate of the one I had left in the penthouse. I opened it and pulled out a stack of high-gloss photos. I held the first photo up to the camera. This is Adrian, I narrated calmly, showing the image of him kissing Bianca on the yacht. And this is Bianca Cross. For the last 3 years, Adrian has been conducting a heavily funded extramarital affair with this woman. He has used marital assets to rent her a luxury apartment in Soho. He has bought her expensive jewelry. I held up the sonogram photo. And yesterday morning, instead of taking me to Paris for our anniversary, he took Bianca to an ultrasound appointment to confirm her pregnancy, I continued. He intended to abandon me at this airport, text me that he was filing for divorce, and offer me a nominal settlement, confident that I lacked the financial resources to hire a lawyer to fight him. Isla, stop! Adrian begged, tears of absolute panic welling in his eyes. He looked desperately at the camera, realizing that his investors, his board of directors, and his major clients were undoubtedly receiving links to this broadcast. Please, you're destroying my company. You're destroying my life. We can settle this privately. We are well past private settlements. Adrian, I replied, setting the photos down. But infidelity is a personal failing. It is a moral bankruptcy. And frankly, my father and the board of Kingsley Global Holdings do not care who you sleep with. Adrian blinked, a tiny, pathetic glimmer of hope sparking in his eyes. He thought I was just humiliating him for the affair. He thought his company might still survive the PR scandal if he issued a massive public apology. I leaned forward, clasping my hands together on the glass table. What Kingsley Global Holdings does care about, however, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming entirely corporate and lethal, is industrial espionage. The tiny glimmer of hope in Adrian's eyes instantly died. Nora, I commanded. Nora tapped her keyboard. A massive digital display screen behind me flickered to life, mirroring what the live stream audience was seeing. The screen displayed a complex, highly detailed log of data transfers. IP addresses, timestamps, and massive file sizes scrolled rapidly across the screen. For the last 8 months, I explained to the camera, Adrian believed I was simply a naive graduate student. He frequently borrowed my personal laptop, claiming his work computer was updating or out of battery. What he didn't know was that my laptop was secured by Kingsley Global's proprietary cybersecurity architecture. I looked directly at Adrian. He was physically shaking now, his hands gripping the edge of the glass table, so hard his knuckles were white. Every time you logged into my computer, Adrian, I said, my voice echoing like a judge handing down a sentence. Our security team logged your keystrokes. We tracked every file you accessed. We watched you bypass my personal folders and attempt to access the encrypted corporate directories I used to communicate with my father and the Kingsley board of directors. I didn't. Adrian stammered, his voice cracking. I was just checking my email. I swear, Isla. I didn't take anything. You downloaded 3 gigabytes of internal Kingsley logistics data, Adrian. I corrected him, pointing to the screen behind me. You transferred it to a hidden cloud server under a shell corporation registered in Delaware. You intended to use that proprietary data to optimize your own software, essentially stealing Kingsley's internal architecture to impress your investors and artificially inflate the valuation of Blackwell's systems. The livestream chat, which Nora was monitoring on a separate monitor, was exploding. The viewer count had surpassed 100,000. Financial journalists, tech bloggers, and corporate analysts were watching a rising CEO be publicly executed for corporate espionage by the daughter of a billionaire. "This is a lie," Adrian shouted, panic driving him to absolute desperation. He looked at the camera, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She's making this up. She's a scorned wife trying to ruin me because I got another woman pregnant. There is no proof of this," I smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp smile that finally stripped away the last remnants of the orphan he thought he had married. "There is absolute proof, Adrian," I said softly, "because I knew you were stealing the data, and my father's cybersecurity team allowed you to take it." Adrian froze. "You see," I explained, leaning back in my chair, "the moment you tried to access my corporate directories, our system flagged you. Instead of locking you out, my team created a shadow directory. We filled it with highly sophisticated, incredibly realistic fake data. We seeded the files with digital watermarks and tracking code." I tapped the glass table. "For the last 6 months, your entire company, Blackwell Sims, has been running its optimization algorithms on poisoned data," I revealed. "You built your entire Q3 product launch on architecture we designed specifically to track your usage. We have irrefutable, mathematically proven evidence that your company is built on stolen, manipulated intellectual property." Adrian stared at me. He wasn't breathing. He looked like a man who had just stepped off the edge of a cliff and was finally looking down at the jagged rocks below. He hadn't just ruined his marriage. He had walked blindly into a corporate trap designed by one of the most ruthless conglomerates on the planet. He had handed Kingsley Global's holdings the exact ammunition they needed to completely dismantle his startup, seize his assets, and send him to federal prison for corporate espionage. The Kingsley Global Legal Department formally submitted the tracking logs and the espionage dossier to the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission at 9 a.m. this morning. I announced to the camera, "Blackwell Systems is currently under federal investigation. Your investors have already been notified." Adrian buried his face in his hands, letting out a long, ragged sob. The arrogant, controlling tech CEO was gone, replaced by a broken, terrified man, realizing his entire life was over. "But I didn't bring you here just to talk about your company, Adrian," I said, my voice softening slightly, shifting the focus away from the corporate execution and back to the personal betrayal. Adrian slowly lifted his head from his hands. His eyes were red, tears streaming down his face. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and utter confusion. He couldn't fathom what else I could possibly take from him. "I brought you here," I said, reaching into the red folder one last time, "to talk about Bianca." I pulled out a small, cracked iPhone. It wasn't mine. It didn't belong to Adrian. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, setting the phone on the glass table. Adrian stared at it. "No. Whose is that?" "It belonged to your mistress," I replied. "She dropped it in the back of an Uber 3 weeks ago. The driver, realizing it was locked, handed it in to the police. But Nora's team is very resourceful. They retrieved it, and they bypassed the passcode." I looked at Nora. "Put the group chat on the screen." The massive digital display behind me shifted. The data logs vanished, replaced by a mirrored display of Bianca's iMessage application. The screen showed a group chat titled, "The Girls." "Let's read some of Bianca's messages to her friends, shall we?" I offered politely. I began to read the text aloud, my voice echoing through the silent VIP lounge. "Adrian is so easy to handle," I read from the screen. "He thinks he's this brilliant CEO, but he's just a narcissist. I just compliment his suits and he buys me whatever I want." Adrian flinched as if he had been physically struck. I scrolled down to a message sent 2 months prior. "The wife is pathetic," I continued reading. "She's some clueless orphan he picked up. She doesn't even know I exist. I'm going to secure the bag. Once I get pregnant, he'll dump her, and I'll get half of everything he owns." She was using me. Adrian whispered, tears streaming down his face. She didn't love me. She was just trying to get my money. Oh, Adrian, I sighed, a profound sense of pity finally entering my voice. It is so much worse than that. I looked directly into his tear-filled eyes. Bianca didn't want your money, I said softly. Bianca wanted your data. She is a corporate spy, Adrian, and she works for Damien Vale. The name hit Adrian like a physical blow. Damien Vale was the CEO of Apex Solutions, Blackwell Systems' biggest, most aggressive competitor. The trap I had laid for Adrian was about to spring its final, most devastating twist. Damien Vale, Adrian repeated, the name tumbling from his lips like a physical weight. Damien Vale was the ruthlessly aggressive CEO of Apex Solutions. For the last 2 years, Blackwell Systems and Apex Solutions had been locked in a vicious, high-stakes price war, constantly undercutting each other to secure government and corporate logistics contracts. Adrian hated Damien with a burning, obsessive passion, and Damien knew it. Nora, switch the display to Exhibit C, I instructed calmly, not breaking eye contact with the camera. The massive screen behind me flickered. The group chat vanished, replaced by a highly detailed financial audit matrix. Bianca Cross did not meet you by accident at that charity gala 3 years ago, Adrian, I explained, leaning back in my chair, projecting the cold, analytical authority of a Kingsley executive dissecting a failed merger. She targeted you, and she didn't do it for free. I gestured to the screen. These are the bank records for Bianca's personal checking account. I narrated to the hundreds of thousands of people now watching the live stream. As you can see, for the last 36 months, Bianca has received a direct deposit of exactly $10,000 on the first of every month. The payee is listed as an LLC registered in Delaware. But if you trace the ownership of that LLC, it leads directly back to a discretionary corporate account managed by Apex Solutions. Adrian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His arrogant, self-made genius persona was completely shattering under the weight of his own profound gullibility. Damien Vale has been paying your mistress a monthly retainer, I stated cleanly. He paid her to seduce you. He paid her to get inside your penthouse. He paid her to gather whatever proprietary information she could glean from your pillow talk and your unlocked laptop. You thought you had found a beautiful woman who adored your brilliance. In reality, you were simply the mark in a very expensive, very effective corporate espionage operation. She loves me, Adrian whimpered, his voice cracking, desperately trying to cling to the last shredded remnant of his reality. She's carrying my child, Isla. She showed me the sonogram. I looked at him. The sheer, pathetic desperation in his eyes was almost difficult to watch. Almost, Nora, I said softly. Exhibit D. The financial audit on the screen disappeared. It was replaced by a series of 4 high-definition photographs, taken by a private investigator. The photos showed Bianca Cross walking into the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Manhattan. The second photo showed her standing by the elevators. The third photo showed her stepping out of the elevator on the penthouse floor. The fourth photo, completely undeniable in its clarity, showed Bianca wrapping her arms around the neck of Damien Vale and kissing him passionately in the hotel corridor. Adrian let out a sound like a wounded animal. He physically recoiled from the table, pressing himself back into his chair as if the photographs were emitting heat. Those photos were taken exactly 2.5 months ago. I informed the livestream audience, my voice ringing with absolute, clinical precision. Adrian, do you remember where you were 2.5 months ago? Adrian stared at the screen, tears cutting through the sweat on his face. He shook his head weakly, unable to speak. You were in London, I reminded him. You were attending a 4-day tech summit. You were 3,000 miles away. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the glass table. The timeline of conception, I said, delivering the final, fatal blow, matches her hotel rendezvous with Damien Vale perfectly. She's pregnant, Adrian. But there is a very high statistical probability that the baby you are financially supporting, the baby you are planning to build a new family with, belongs to your biggest corporate rival. The silence in the VIP lounge was deafening. The only sound was the quiet, rhythmic hum of the live streaming equipment and the ragged, shallow breathing of a man who had just lost absolutely everything. Adrian Blackwell had spent 3 years building what he thought was a masterpiece of manipulation. He thought he was playing me. He thought he was outsmarting his competitors. Instead, he was the pawn. Bianca was using him for a paycheck. Damian Vale was using him for corporate intelligence. And I, the orphan he thought he had trapped, had been using his own arrogance to build a federal indictment against him. He didn't just lose his marriage. He lost his company. He lost his freedom. He lost his pride. And he lost the delusion that he was the smartest man in the room. Adrian slumped forward, resting his forehead against the cool glass of the table. He sobbed, a deep, ugly, humiliating sound that was broadcast in high definition to the entire world. I looked at the camera one last time. For 3 years, I addressed the audience, my voice calm, steady, and entirely free of bitterness. Adrian Blackwell believed that because I didn't scream, because I didn't cry, and because I didn't have a loud family to defend me, I was weak. He believed my silence was submission. I stood up from the chair. I smoothed the lapels of my white blazer. My silence was not submission, I stated. My silence was documentation. I turned to Nora. Cut the feed. Nora hit the kill switch. The green light on the 4K camera instantly went dark. The screen behind me snapped to black. The broadcast was over. The immediate silence in the room felt incredibly heavy. I picked up my phone and my designer purse from the table. I turned to walk toward the exit of the VIP lounge. Isla, wait! Adrian screamed, scrambling out of his chair. He lunged toward me, but the 2 security guards instantly intercepted him, throwing him roughly back against the glass wall. Don't touch me, I said, not even turning around to look at him. Isla, please, Adrian begged, sliding down the glass wall until he was practically kneeling on the floor. You can't just leave me like this. You destroyed me. You destroyed my company. You destroyed my entire life. I stopped. I turned slowly, looking down at the broken, weeping man who had promised to love and protect me. Do you think you won? Adrian shouted, his grief momentarily giving way to a desperate, furious need to hurt me back. Is this a victory for you? Exposing your own husband to the world. Are you happy now? I looked at him. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound, overwhelming sense of exhaustion. I don't need to win, Adrian, I replied, my voice echoing coldly in the massive lounge. I just needed everyone to watch you lose. I turned my back on him. The security guards opened the heavy frosted glass doors. I stepped out of the VIP lounge, leaving Adrian Blackwell sobbing on the floor, surrounded by the expensive equipment of his own public execution. I didn't look back. The internet, however, did not have the luxury of walking away. By the time I reached the private aviation terminal on the opposite side of JFK, the live stream had already become a global phenomenon. Boss, Nora said, walking briskly beside me, looking at her tablet. The metrics are unprecedented. The hashtag billionaire wife revenge is trending #1 globally across 3 platforms. Financial news outlets have already picked up the federal investigation angle. Blackwell Systems stock, which was trading on the secondary market, has plummeted 80% in the last 30 minutes. And Damian Vale? I asked, handing my passport to the private concierge. Nora smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. Apex Solutions Board of Directors just issued an emergency press release stating they are launching an immediate internal investigation into Mr. Vale's conduct. It seems Margot Vale, his wife, watched the live stream. Our sources say she just locked him out of their penthouse and hired the most aggressive divorce attorney in Manhattan. I nodded, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. I hadn't just removed the tumor from my own life. I had initiated a corporate and social cleansing. As I walked toward the tarmac, my phone began to vibrate violently. It was a call from an unknown number, but the area code was from Connecticut. I knew exactly who it was. I accepted the call, putting it on speakerphone as I walked. Isla Bennett. Gloria Blackwell, my mother-in-law, shrieked through the speaker. Her voice was shrill, panicked, and vibrating with rage. What have you done? Adrian's investors are calling my house. The country club is buzzing. You vindictive, psychotic little bitch. You have ruined my son. I stopped walking. I looked at the massive Gulfstream G650 parked on the tarmac, the Kingsley crest subtly painted on the tail. "Hello, Gloria," I said smoothly. "How dare you humiliate my family like this?" Gloria screamed, entirely bypassing her son's infidelity to focus on the social optics. "Adrian made a mistake. Men make mistakes. You do not air dirty laundry in public. I always knew you were trash. You were a nobody when he found you, and you're a nobody now. I will hire a team of lawyers to sue you for defamation." I let her scream. I let her vent 3 years of suppressed hatred for the poor orphan she thought had trapped her son. "Gloria," I interrupted, my voice slicing through her hysteria with the cold authority of a billionaire. "You can't afford a team of lawyers." Gloria scoffed loudly. "Excuse me. My legal team filed a lien against your Connecticut estate 20 minutes ago," I informed her calmly. The line went dead silent. 18 months ago, I explained. "You approached me privately, crying about Adrian's father's gambling debts. You begged me to lend you $200,000 to cover the mortgage and remodel your kitchen so you wouldn't lose face at the country club. You made me promise not to tell Adrian, because you knew he would cut you off." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. She hadn't forgotten. She had simply assumed the orphan was too weak to ever collect. "The promissory note you signed wasn't with Isla Bennett," I said softly. "It was with a subsidiary of Kingsley Global Holdings, and according to the terms of that contract, the loan was due in full upon demand. I am demanding it, Gloria. You have 30 days to wire $200,000 to my legal team, or the bank will foreclose on your home." "Isla, please," Gloria gasped, the arrogance completely vanishing, replaced by sheer terror. "I don't have that kind of liquidity. You can't do this. We are family." "We were never family, Gloria," I replied. "You made that abundantly clear every time you mocked my cheap clothes and my lack of pedigree. You wanted Adrian to leave me for a woman with status. Well, congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted." I didn't wait for her to respond. I hung up the phone and blocked her number. I walked across the tarmac, the wind whipping my hair around my face. The captain of the Gulfstream stood at the bottom of the air stairs, offering a crisp salute. "Welcome aboard, Miss Kingsley," the captain said. "Flight plan is filed. We are cleared for Paris." "Thank you, Captain." I nodded. I climbed the stairs and stepped into the ultra-luxurious cabin of the private jet. Edmond Laurent, my father's chief of staff, was standing by the mahogany bar, holding a crystal glass of expensive champagne. He offered me a warm, deeply respectful smile. "A masterful execution, Miss Kingsley," Edmond said, handing me the champagne. The chairman watched the entire broadcast from the boardroom in Paris. He asked me to convey his profound pride. I took the glass, sinking into the plush leather seat. "Thank you, Edmond. Has the legal team secured the necessary injunctions against Blackwell's systems?" "They have," Edmond confirmed, taking a seat across from me. "Adrian's assets are entirely frozen pending the federal investigation. He will likely face a minimum of 5 to 7 years in federal prison for industrial espionage, assuming he cooperates. If he fights the charges, our legal department will ensure the sentence is maximized." "And Bianca Cross?" I asked, taking a sip of the champagne. "Apex Solutions has disavowed any knowledge of her actions," Edmond reported. "Damien Vale is claiming she acted independently to extort him. Her consulting firm is functionally bankrupt. She is currently facing multiple lawsuits for breach of contract and corporate fraud." I looked out the window as the jet began to taxi down the runway. The revenge was complete. The surgical strike had been executed flawlessly. Adrian had lost his company, his wealth, his reputation, and his freedom. Bianca had lost her corporate backing, her credibility, and the wealthy lifestyle she had tried so desperately to steal. But as the Gulfstream lifted off the runway, banking sharply over the New York skyline, I didn't feel the adrenaline of victory anymore. I felt a quiet, profound sense of mourning. I mourned the girl I was 3 years ago. The girl who had hidden her billionaire identity because she desperately wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she owned. I mourned the marriage I thought I was building. I mourned the family I thought I was creating. Adrian hadn't just cheated on me. He had killed the softest, most vulnerable part of my soul. He had forced the orphan to die, so the heiress could survive. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the city disappear beneath the clouds. "Are you all right, Miss Kingsley?" Edmund asked softly, his sharp eyes catching the slight shift in my demeanor. "I will be, Edmund," I replied, my voice steady. "I just need to sleep." I closed my eyes. The flight to Paris was quiet, smooth, and incredibly isolating. When we finally landed at Le Bourget Airport, the sun was just beginning to rise over the French countryside. A convoy of black Range Rovers was waiting on the tarmac, the Kingsley crest glinting in the morning light. I stepped off the plane. Standing by the lead vehicle was an older man with silver hair, wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. He radiated absolute, uncompromising power. My father. Victor Kingsley didn't say a word as I approached him. He didn't offer a corporate handshake or a formal greeting. He simply opened his arms. I walked into his embrace. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't an orphan. I wasn't a disposable asset. I wasn't a woman fighting a silent war in the dark. I was a daughter. My father held me tightly, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "You did well, Isla," Victor murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You protected yourself. You protected the family. I am so incredibly proud of you." "I missed you, Dad," I whispered, tears finally quietly slipping down my cheeks. He pulled back, wiping a tear from my face with his thumb. He looked at me, his expression hardening with the fierce, protective pride of a titan. "Welcome home, Isla," Victor said. I took a deep breath, the cold morning air filling my lungs, clearing away the last lingering shadows of my past life. "It's good to be home," I replied. We got into the Range Rover. The convoy pulled away from the airport, heading toward the family estate in the heart of Paris. My marriage to Adrian Blackwell was over. The betrayal was exposed. The corporate espionage was neutralized. But as the city of Paris passed by my window, I realized the story wasn't quite finished yet. Bianca Cross, desperate to salvage her reputation, was about to make one final catastrophic mistake. And Adrian, sitting in a holding cell in New York, was about to realize that the Kingsley family's vengeance didn't stop at the courtroom door. The live stream had been the execution. But the real corporate bloodbath was just about to begin. The internet has a very short, very volatile memory. 3 days after my live stream at JFK, public opinion began to waver. The initial shock of the billionaire heiress revealing her cheating, corporate spy husband was intoxicating for the media, but the narrative needed a new angle to survive the 24-hour news cycle. Bianca Cross recognized the shifting tides, and she attempted a desperate, incredibly calculated counterattack. On Thursday morning, Bianca went live on her own social media platform. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or heavy makeup. She was sitting on a plain white sofa in her Soho apartment, wearing an oversized, modest sweater. She looked pale, exhausted, and incredibly vulnerable. She strategically framed the shot so her slightly rounded stomach was visible. "I know the world hates me right now," Bianca began, her voice trembling, tears welling perfectly in her eyes. "I know Isla Kingsley painted me as a monster. But you only heard her side of the story. You heard the side of a ruthless billionaire who has the power to crush anyone she wants." I sat in the massive, sunlit study of my family's Parisian estate, watching Bianca's broadcast on my iPad. Nora sat across from me, her fingers hovering over her laptop, ready to deploy our countermeasures. "Adrian Blackwell manipulated me," Bianca sobbed, wiping a tear from her cheek. "He told me he was separated. He told me his wife was abusive and unstable. When I found out she was actually a billionaire heiress, I was terrified. He threatened me. He told me if I tried to leave, her family would destroy me. I was trapped. And the money from Apex Solutions? I was a consultant. Damien Vale hired me to plan corporate events. I didn't know anything about corporate espionage. I am just a pregnant woman trying to survive a nightmare." It was a brilliant performance. She played the victim card flawlessly. She weaponized my wealth against me, framing me as the cold, untouchable Goliath, crushing the poor, pregnant David. And because the internet loves an underdog, the narrative started to shift. Comments flooded her live stream, offering sympathy. People started tweeting that I had gone too far by ruining Adrian's life and that Bianca was just collateral damage in a toxic marriage. She's gaining traction, Nora noted, her tone perfectly flat. Several mid-tier gossip blogs are already running articles painting her as a manipulated victim. Do you want the legal team to issue a cease and desist? No, I replied, taking a sip of my espresso. A cease and desist just proves her point that I'm a billionaire trying to silence her. We don't silence her, Nora. We audit her, understood? Nora smiled, her fingers flying across the keyboard. What's the protocol? Release the unredacted hotel security footage, I instructed, and post the full financial audit of her consulting firm. Don't issue a statement. Just post the data. Let the internet do the math. 10 minutes later, the official corporate account for Kingsley Global Holdings posted a single, highly anticipated thread. There was no angry rant. There was no emotional defense. There was just raw, undeniable documentation. The first post was a high-resolution, unedited security video from the Four Seasons Hotel. It showed Bianca Cross walking into the lobby, greeting Damien Vale with a passionate kiss, and then entering the elevator with him. The timestamp clearly showed the event occurred at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday while Adrian was in London. The second post was the financial audit of Vale Harbor Advisory, Bianca's supposed event planning firm. The audit proved that in the 3 years since its inception, the firm had planned exactly 0 corporate events. It had no staff. It had no vendors. It had no legitimate business expenses. Its only source of income was the $10,000 monthly wire transfer from Damien Vale's discretionary account. The final post was a screenshot of a text message exchange between Bianca and Damien, retrieved from her cracked iPhone. Bianca, Adrian is getting suspicious about the timeline of the pregnancy. I need more money if you want me to keep distracting him while your tech guys finish cloning his logistics software. Asterisk Damien. Don't get greedy, Bianca. You'll get your bonus when Blackwell Systems files for bankruptcy. Keep him busy. I didn't add a caption. I didn't write an essay defending myself. I just dropped the absolute mathematical proof of her guilt and let the internet devour it. The shift in public opinion was instantaneous and violently brutal. The people who had sympathized with Bianca's tearful live stream 10 minutes earlier suddenly realized they had been played. They didn't just turn on her, they obliterated her. The hashtag #FakeTears trending alongside corporate spy completely buried her attempt to play the victim. Bianca Cross lost everything. Apex Solutions formally terminated their consulting contract with her LLC, publicly disavowing her actions. The landlord of her expensive Soho apartment, realizing the rent was no longer being subsidized by Adrian's stolen marital funds, initiated eviction proceedings. With her reputation completely destroyed and her income stream severed, Bianca was forced to move back to her hometown in Ohio, completely vanishing from the luxury New York social scene she had so desperately tried to infiltrate. As for Adrian, his descent was far more absolute. 3 weeks after my arrival in Paris, the FBI formally indicted Adrian Blackwell on 4 counts of industrial espionage, wire fraud, and intellectual property theft because I had provided the federal investigators with the exact server logs, the fake data tracking codes, and the precise timeline of his illegal downloads. The case against him was airtight. His high-priced defense attorneys, realizing they were fighting a losing battle against the infinite legal resources of Kingsley Global Holdings, advised him to take a plea deal. Adrian Blackwell, the arrogant, self-proclaimed tech genius who thought he was smarter than everyone in the room, stood before a federal judge in a New York courtroom and pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Blackwell Systems, bleeding clients, and facing massive corporate lawsuits from Kingsley Global, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The board of directors liquidated the company's remaining assets, selling off the office furniture, the servers, and the software patents for pennies on the dollar to satisfy their creditors. Adrian's mother, Gloria, faced her own bitter reckoning. When the 30-day deadline for her $200,000 loan expired, the Kingsley Global subsidiary initiated foreclosure proceedings on her Connecticut estate. Gloria desperately tried to secure a loan from her country club friends to save her home, but the toxicity of the Blackwell name made her radioactive. No one would lend her a dime. The woman who had spent 3 years mocking my lack of pedigree was physically evicted from her home, forced to watch as the bank auctioned off her designer furniture and her beloved remodeled kitchen. She moved into a small, rented apartment in a less desirable zip code, completely cut off from the high society world she valued above all else. The destruction of the Blackwell family was complete. The people who had viewed me as a disposable asset were now entirely bankrupt, socially exiled, or sitting in a federal penitentiary. I spent the next 6 months living quietly in Paris. I walked the gardens of the family estate. I read books in the massive library. I spent hours talking with my father, rebuilding the relationship I had distanced myself from in my desperate pursuit of a normal life. I healed. I realized that my anger toward Adrian hadn't just been about the infidelity. It had been about the insult to my intelligence. It had been about his fundamental assumption that I was weak. I wasn't weak. I had never been weak. I had simply chosen to be quiet. One evening, my father called me into his private study. Victor Kingsley was sitting behind his massive oak desk, reviewing a stack of corporate dossiers. He looked up as I entered, gesturing for me to sit in the leather chair opposite him. "You look well, Isla," Victor said, his sharp eyes assessing me with a mixture of paternal affection and corporate scrutiny. "I feel well, Dad," I replied honestly. "The quiet has been good for me." Victor nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Quiet is necessary for healing, but Kingsley blood is not meant to remain quiet forever." He slid a heavy, leather-bound dossier across the desk. "I am stepping down as chairman of the North American division next year," Victor announced, his voice steady. "The board is currently vetting candidates for the position. They are looking for someone with absolute discretion, aggressive strategic foresight, and an uncompromising ability to execute under pressure." I looked at the dossier. It wasn't a list of candidates. It was an organizational chart for the North American division, with my name printed at the very top. "You handled the Blackwell situation with surgical precision, Isla," my father continued, a proud smile finally breaking through his stoic demeanor. "You didn't just eliminate a personal threat. You neutralized a corporate espionage operation and secured our intellectual property." The board noticed. I reached out and touched the leather cover of the dossier. "You want me to go back to New York," I said softly. "I want you to take your rightful place," Victor corrected me. "You spent 3 years pretending to be someone you weren't because you were afraid of the weight of the Kingsley name. But the name didn't break you, Isla. It empowered you. You are a Kingsley. It is time you started operating like one." I looked at my father. I thought about the terrified girl standing in the VIP lounge at JFK, clutching a stack of printed photos, preparing to burn her entire life to the ground. I wasn't that girl anymore. I had survived the fire, and I had emerged forged in steel. I opened the dossier. "When do I start?" I asked. 6 weeks later, I walked through the revolving glass doors of the Kingsley Global Holdings headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. I was wearing a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit. My hair was pulled back in a sharp, elegant twist. I didn't walk with the hesitant, unassuming posture of Isla Bennett, the grateful orphan. I walked with the absolute, uncompromising authority of Isla Kingsley, the executive vice president of North American operations. Nora walked beside me, holding a tablet, matching my brisk pace. "The acquisition of Apex Solutions is finalized, boss," Nora reported, her voice crisp and efficient. Damian Vale was forced out by his board following the espionage scandal. "We purchased their logistics infrastructure at a 40% discount." "Excellent," I nodded, stepping into the private executive elevator. "Integrate their servers immediately, but purge their executive staff. I don't want anyone from Vale's old regime infecting our corporate culture." "Understood." Nora smiled, noting the directive on her tablet. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the massive, penthouse-level executive suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the New York skyline. The city stretched out before me, vast and glittering, a landscape of endless possibilities. I walked into my corner office. It was a magnificent space, decorated in sleek, modern lines, exuding power and wealth. I stood behind the massive mahogany desk, looking out at the city I had once felt so small and vulnerable in. I thought about Adrian sitting in a federal prison cell. I thought about Bianca living in obscurity in Ohio. I thought about Gloria isolated in her rented apartment. They had tried to write my story for me. They had tried to cast me as the victim, the collateral damage, the disposable stepping stone to their own success. They failed because they fundamentally misunderstood the nature of power. True power doesn't need to scream. It doesn't need to throw temper tantrums or beg for validation. True power sits in the dark, gathering evidence, signing the paperwork, and waiting for the exact right moment to turn the lights on. I didn't lose a husband when Adrian left me at the airport. I didn't lose a marriage. I recovered my identity. I reclaimed my name. And I discovered exactly what I was capable of. I sat down in the executive leather chair. I opened my laptop, ready to begin my first day, running a multi-billion-dollar empire. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't the destruction of your enemies. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply letting them watch as you become completely untouchable. So tell me honestly, if your partner abandoned you and underestimated your strength because they thought you had no power, would you confront them with tears and anger? Or would you quietly gather the evidence, wait for the perfect public moment, and let them discover exactly who you really are? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.